All aboard, if you dare. Tonight, we're taking a journey on trains that never quite reach their final destination. These haunted locomotives carry more than just passengers, they're filled with ghostly conductors, spectral travelers, and tragic tales left behind on the tracks. So, grab your ticket and hold on tight, because once these haunted trains start rolling, there's no telling where, or when, you'll get off. Haunted trains are a fascinating subject. There's something inherently eerie about abandoned tracks, late-night journeys, and the constant movement through dark, unknown landscapes. Let's dive into one of the most famous haunted train stories, the tale of the ghost train of Street Louis. The ghost train of Street Louis, the eerie lights of the phantom locomotive. The town of Street Louis, Saskatchewan, Canada, is a quiet place, far from the bustle of big cities. But for decades, it was known for one of the most mysterious phenomena in Canada, the appearance of a ghostly light on an abandoned railway track, known as the Street Louis ghost train. This spectral phenomenon has left locals, investigators, and visitors mystified for over a century. It is a tale that combines tragedy, mystery, and an unexplained haunting that persists to this day. The story takes place along a now abandoned railway line that once connected the small town of Street Louis with nearby villages and cities. The line had been in operation for many years, serving as a vital transportation route for goods and passengers. But over time, as with many old railways, it was eventually decommissioned, and the tracks were removed, leaving only the scar of the former route cutting through the rural landscape. The haunting of the Street Louis ghost train was first reported in the early 1900s, soon after a tragic accident that would forever change the lives of the railway workers and townspeople who depended on the line. The origins of the ghostly apparition can be traced back to a fatal accident that occurred one cold, foggy night. The engineer, a seasoned veteran who had operated trains along the line for years, was guiding his locomotive through the thick mist. His fireman, responsible for maintaining the engine's power, was in the cabin beside him, shoveling coal into the furnace. As the train approached a curve in the tracks, disaster struck. A miscommunication with a signal operator led to the train barreling down the tracks at full speed, unaware that another train was stopped further ahead on the same track. The engineer, realizing too late that they were on a collision course, slammed on the brakes, but the momentum was too great. The resulting crash was catastrophic. The engineer was thrown from the train and killed instantly, his body found later, severed from the impact. The fireman, trapped inside the cabin, was burned alive in the explosion of steam and fire that followed the crash. Several passengers aboard the stopped train were also injured, but it was the deaths of the engineer and fireman that would leave an indelible mark on the railway, and perhaps, lead to its haunting. Soon after the accident, people living near the tracks began to report strange occurrences. The most consistent and widely reported phenomenon was the appearance of a ghostly light traveling along the old railway line at night. The light was often described as a bright, white or yellowish orb, floating just above the ground, following the path where the tracks once lay. It would appear without warning, hovering in the distance before slowly approaching the viewer, growing larger and brighter as it neared. Locals were both fascinated and frightened by the light, which would disappear just as mysteriously as it had appeared, vanishing into thin air or fading out gradually until the night was dark once more. Some claimed to hear the faint sound of a train whistle in the distance, while others reported the rumbling of a locomotive's wheels against the ground, though the tracks had long been removed. What was particularly eerie was that the light seemed to follow the exact path where the old train had traveled, including the sharp curve where the fatal accident had occurred. Witnesses often reported seeing the light at the same time of night as the original crash, suggesting that the ghostly train was forever reenacting the final moments of the engineer and his crew. As the sightings of the ghost train grew more frequent, locals began to share stories and theories about what could be causing the haunting. The most popular belief was that the light represented the spirit of the dead engineer, forever doomed to drive his phantom train along the tracks, searching for a way to prevent the tragic crash that had claimed his life. Some claimed that the light was actually the ghost of the fireman, still carrying his lantern as he walked the tracks, desperately trying to warn the oncoming train of the danger ahead. His spirit, they said, was trapped in an endless loop, unable to rest until the crash was averted. Others suggested that the light was not a ghost at all, but rather some sort of unexplained natural phenomenon, perhaps caused by electrical discharges or reflections of distant lights. However, these explanations did little to satisfy those who had seen the ghostly light up close, who swore that it behaved in ways no natural phenomenon could explain. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence in favor of the supernatural explanation came from eyewitnesses who described seeing not just the light, but the faint outline of a train in the mist. On more than one occasion, people reported seeing the shape of a steam locomotive moving along the path of the old railway, its wheels turning slowly, but with no sound except for the distant, echoing whistle that accompanied it. The ghostly train would glide past, barely visible through the fog, before fading into nothingness. Over the years, many investigators, both professional and amateur, have attempted to solve the mystery of the Street Louis ghost train. Some came equipped with scientific instruments, hoping to measure electromagnetic fields, temperature fluctuations, or other phenomena that could explain the light. Others came with cameras and recording devices, eager to capture evidence of the haunting. In one notable investigation, a team of paranormal researchers set up camp near the old railway line, hoping to catch the ghost train on film. On the second night of their stay, they were not disappointed. As they watched the abandoned track bed, the familiar ghostly light appeared in the distance, slowly making its way toward them. The researchers scrambled to set up their equipment, but as soon as the light came close enough to be seen clearly, it suddenly flickered and vanished, leaving them standing in the dark, unsure of what they had just witnessed. Despite the best efforts of investigators, no definitive explanation has ever been found for the ghostly light. While some have suggested that it could be a result of car headlights reflecting off the landscape, this theory doesn't account for the many sightings that occurred long before automobiles were common in the area. To this day, the Street Louis ghost train remains one of Canada's most enduring mysteries. Although the old railway line has long since been converted into a hiking trail, the ghostly light continues to appear to those who venture out at night. Visitors from all over the world come to Street Louis in the hopes of seeing the ghost train for themselves, and many leave with their own stories of strange lights, eerie sounds, and unexplained phenomena. Some locals believe that the spirits of the engineer and firemen will continue to haunt the tracks until the tragedy that claimed their lives is properly acknowledged. Others think that the haunting is a warning to future generations, a reminder of the dangers that once plagued the railways and the lives that were lost in service to the relentless march of progress. Whatever the cause of the Street Louis ghost train, one thing is certain: the mystery is far from over, and the ghostly light will continue to glide along the tracks, its spectral glow a chilling reminder of a tragedy long past but never forgotten. The Phantom Train of Boston Bridge. Nestled in the small town of Statesville, North Carolina, Boston Bridge is an unassuming, stone-arch railway bridge that, at first glance, looks like many others scattered across the country. But beneath its quiet appearance, Boston Bridge holds a dark secret, one that has terrified locals and fascinated ghost hunters for over a century. On a warm summer night in August of 1891, a tragic accident occurred at this very spot. A passenger train, loaded with travelers and cargo, derailed and plunged off the bridge into the ravine below. The disaster claimed the lives of 23 passengers and crew, their deaths marked by screams that echoed into the night. To this day, many believe that the ghosts of the victims still haunt the bridge, and on the anniversary of the crash, some claim to see, and hear, a phantom train, replaying the tragedy over and over again. It was the evening of August 27, 1891, and the Richmond and Danville passenger train No. 9, known as the Western North Carolina Railroad, was on its way from Salisbury to Asheville, carrying passengers eager to reach their destination. The train was running late that night, speeding along the tracks in a rush to make up for lost time. It was a starless, quiet night as the train approached Boston Bridge, a 60-foot-high stone structure that spanned the deep ravine of Third Creek. As the train rumbled onto the bridge, disaster struck. Without warning, the train derailed, and the passenger cars toppled off the side of the bridge, crashing down into the rocky creek bed below. The locomotive, baggage cars, and passenger coaches all tumbled in a twisted heap of metal and wood. Screams echoed through the night as passengers were thrown from their seats, some instantly killed by the impact, others trapped in the wreckage as the cars caught fire. Survivors scrambled to free themselves from the twisted remains of the train, but many were crushed under the weight of the collapsing debris. The rescue teams who arrived hours later were met with a scene of utter devastation. The bodies of passengers were scattered across the creek bed, some burned beyond recognition, others lying lifeless in the shallow waters of the creek. Of the 30 passengers on board, 23 were killed and the rest gravely injured. The town of Statesville was plunged into mourning as families struggled to cope with the sudden loss of their loved ones. The cause of the derailment was never definitively determined, though some speculated it was due to excessive speed as the train attempted to make up time. The first haunting for years, the bridge stood as a silent witness to the tragedy, and with time, the memory of the disaster began to fade. But that all changed on the 50th anniversary of the crash. On the night of August 27, 1941, a group of locals gathered near Boston Bridge to honor the memory of those who had died in the crash. They expected a quiet vigil, but what they experienced would haunt them for the rest of their lives. As the group stood near the bridge, they suddenly heard the distant sound of a train whistle. At first, they thought it was just their imagination, but the sound grew louder, the rumble of wheels on tracks filling the air. In the distance, they saw the faint glow of a train's headlight approaching the bridge. The group watched in stunned silence as the phantom train drew closer, its outline becoming clearer with each passing moment. It was the same make and model as the Richmond and Danville train that had crashed 50 years earlier. The train sped toward the bridge, and just as it reached the spot where the derailment had occurred, it veered off the tracks and plunged into the ravine below. The crash was as real as it had been half a century before. Metal screeched, wood splintered, and the echoes of screams filled the night air. Shaken, the witnesses rushed down to the creek bed, expecting to find the wreckage and bodies of the passengers. But when they reached the ravine, there was nothing there, no train, no wreckage, no sign that anything had happened at all. The ghostly train had vanished into thin air, leaving only the memory of its fatal plunge. The ghostly train at Boston Bridge became a local legend, and sightings of the phantom locomotive began to occur more frequently. Every year, on the anniversary of the crash, people would gather at the bridge, hoping to catch a glimpse of the spectral train. Many claimed to have seen the headlight of the phantom train approaching in the distance, while others reported hearing the unmistakable sound of the train whistle and the rumbling of the engine as it sped toward the bridge. Some witnesses described seeing ghostly figures standing on the train as it passed, passengers in old-fashioned clothing, staring blankly ahead, as though unaware of their impending doom. These apparitions would disappear just as the train reached the spot where it had derailed, leaving only an eerie silence in their wake. In one particularly chilling account, a group of paranormal investigators visited the bridge in the late 1980s, equipped with cameras and recording devices. As they set up their equipment, they heard the distant sound of a train whistle and felt the ground tremble beneath their feet. Moments later, they saw the phantom train approaching. But as they scrambled to capture footage, their cameras malfunctioned, and by the time they regained control of their equipment, the train had vanished. When they reviewed the recordings, they found that while the cameras had failed to capture the train, the audio devices had picked up the sound of a train whistle and the unmistakable crash of metal as the phantom train careened off the bridge. Over the years, various theories have been proposed to explain the sightings of the phantom train at Boston Bridge. Some skeptics argue that the sounds and lights are simply the result of natural phenomena, perhaps the wind moving through the ravine or the reflection of distant car headlights. Others suggest that the sightings are a form of mass hysteria, fueled by the tragic history of the site and the power of suggestion. But for those who have witnessed the ghostly train firsthand, there is no doubt in their minds that what they saw was real. Many believe that the spirits of the passengers and crew who died in the 1891 crash are trapped in a perpetual loop, forced to relive the moments leading up to their deaths over and over again. Others speculate that the phantom train is a residual haunting, a recording of the tragic event imprinted on the environment, replaying itself on the anniversary of the crash. This theory is often used to explain hauntings that occur in places with a history of sudden, violent death, where the emotional energy of the event is believed to leave a permanent mark on the surroundings. Despite the bridge's eerie reputation, the sightings of the phantom train have continued into modern times. In 2010, A tragic event occurred when a group of paranormal enthusiasts visiting the bridge were struck by a real train. The group had come to the bridge on the anniversary of the 1891 crash, hoping to witness the ghostly train. Unaware that the bridge was still in use, they stood on the tracks, waiting for the phantom train to appear. Instead, a real train came barreling down the line, killing one person and injuring others. This tragedy only served to deepen the legend of Boston Bridge, with some suggesting that the group had been lured to the tracks by the spirits of the original crash victims. Today, Boston Bridge remains one of the most haunted places in North Carolina. Visitors continue to report strange occurrences near the bridge, from ghostly lights and sounds to the eerie sensation of being watched. For those brave enough to visit the site, the bridge serves as a reminder of the lives lost in the tragic 1891 crash and the enduring mystery of the phantom train that still haunts the tracks. Whether the ghostly train is a residual haunting or something more malevolent, one thing is clear: the spirits of Boston Bridge are not at rest, and the ghostly train will continue to haunt the area for years to come.
Into the street, congratulations.